Good evening. I'm here to talk about something that's close to many people's hearts. It's involving immigrant visas and particularly related to family members seeking immigrant visas during these difficult times of COVID-19. So I'm going to try to, in my few minutes here, talk about three primary issues, just to give you an overview about first, how you start the immigrant visa process, and second, from there, what happens after that initial petition. And then finally, I'm going to touch on what family-based immigrant visas are being issued during this difficult time of COVID-19. So let's start with the process. The process is started for a US citizen by filing a petition for their family member. Typically, that petition is filed with USCIS. But for those of you in Germany, there might be a chance or a legal way for you to file with the US Consulate General, and that particularly applies to service members who are permanently stationed at a base here in Germany, or certain US citizens with exceptional circumstances. And if you want to get more information about that, you can visit our website, which will provide you some of the more details about that. So once that petition is filed, it then goes to initial processing, and that's really going through and making sure that we have a complete file. We start that process by looking and verifying the petition. Of course, we make sure we get any fees, and then we also have both the petitioner, the US citizen, as well as the visa applicant submit additional information. And that might be financial documents, verification of citizenship, marriage certificates, things like that. And then there's an initial administrative review to make sure that that file is complete and ready for the interview. What's important to note is during this initial processing, it's really a paper review. It's not really getting into, is this person really qualified for a visa, but is their file complete? So then the big step is the third one, and that is once that file is complete, the applicant is eligible to schedule an interview and have an interview at the US Consulate General, in our case here in Frankfurt. And it's at this point that the case is adjudicated or reviewed and decided, and that's where it is thoroughly reviewed to make sure it complies with the requirements. And assuming that the consular officer decides to issue the visa, then your family member has their visa and is eligible to enter the US and be admitted as a legal permanent resident. So just to give you a little bit more detail about what the consular officer is looking at when they're reviewing and interviewing the applicant, the first thing to note is that each case that we look at is reviewed separately and on its own merits. So that's very important. Each file is looked at to see what the issues are and to determine how to conduct the interview and what might be the areas to focus on. But really what the consular officer is trying to do is make sure that the applicant is truly qualified and meets all the legal requirements, so that they have the relationship that's required, that they meet the financial requirements to immigrate to the United States, that they have a proper police checks and have submitted those certificates and other original documents to basically cross T's and dot I's to make sure the person's qualified. The consular officer is also looking at any potential fraud concerns and is also reviewing whether the applicant has any ineligibilities. Things like certain criminal backgrounds or certain past problems in use of visas or overstays in the United States. And if there are ineligibilities, in many cases, an applicant is able to apply for a waiver with the Department of Homeland Security. Many people have questions, and many people are curious about fiancé visas. And I want to address those a little bit separately from these other family-based immigrant visas. The process has a lot of similarities, but there are some important differences in the details. First off, number one, a fiancé visa is technically a non-immigrant visa, even though all of you might understand that if you're having a fiancé come to the United States, that ultimately that person is going to become a permanent resident. But they are really being given a visa to enter the United States so that they can marry, and they're required to do so within 90 days to comply with that non-immigrant visa. So unlike the typical immigrant visa, when the person enters, they're entering as a non-immigrant, and then after the marriage, the fiancé, now the spouse, can apply to adjust status and become a legal permanent resident. So those are just some important distinctions in the differences between the fiancé and other family member visas. One other topic that is, of course, important to touch on is what family-based visas are we currently looking at and handling right now during the COVID-19 time period. And essentially, we're handling spouses and children of US citizens. And those are the ones that are specifically allowed for us to handle under the presidential proclamations. There are also some cases where we are able to handle fiancés, and we certainly are making those a priority whenever we can. But the real exceptions, or the only times we can do that, is when the fiancé has a US citizen child, or the fiancé somehow meets a public health exception under the presidential proclamations. And so those are the ways that we would handle those cases. So from there, I think we're going to move into a time period of questions. Certainly, if you have questions about a particular case that's being handled at Frankfurt, you can send us an email at the Frankfurt Visa Inquiries at state.gov. Thank you.